This week, it's time for some ice, snow, and a demigod or two as Angelo heads off into the wilderness with new PlayStation 4 parenting simulator, God of War. We point out 5 reasons why you'll love Monster Hunter World, even if you've never played a game in the series before, and Nate and the 2-hour team spend about 120 minutes with turn-based strategy Pit People to see if it's worth your money. This is Player Attack. Hi, I'm Jessica Citizen, and this week Valve has been smacked down by the Australian consumer watchdog. Late last year, the federal court found that Valve had breached Australian consumer law and needed to pay a $3 million penalty over matters relating to refunds and digital purchases. Valve, predictably, sought special leave to appeal the decision, but this week the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has dismissed the application and upheld that even though the company is based in Seattle in the US, Valve is still bound by Australian consumer law when dealing with Aussie customers. The news comes nearly 4 years after the ACCC commenced legal action against the publisher and 2 years after the federal court found that Valve had engaged in misleading or deceptive conduct and had made false or misleading representations. Valve appealed the initial 2016 finding but was shot down, and the same thing's just happened again, but this time the ruling is final. But speaking of a completely different part of Valve, the publisher has just acquired Campo Santo, the 12-person studio that brought you the award-winning experience Firewatch. The team are quick to point out that all of them will maintain their jobs as video game developers working on their current project in the Valley of Gods. Gaming fans around the world have been polarised by this news. On one hand, it could signal Valve's return to single-player story-driven content, something that has been sorely missing in the publisher's recent repertoire. On the other are the skeptics. What does this really mean for Campo Santo and in the Valley of Gods? Will it still have that unique charm that made Firewatch so wonderful, or will the studio just be another cog in a much bigger machine? Now, remember how we mentioned a little while ago that every single game on the market will soon have a Battle Royale mode? You all thought we were kidding, right? Well, there are 2 rumours doing the rounds this week that suggest we might have been closer to the truth than we thought. Firstly, Call of Duty Black Ops 4 will reportedly be multiplayer only, doing away with any kind of single-player campaign and seriously breaking with tradition. Of course, that means that multiplayer will have to be beefed up with, what else? A Battle Royale mode. More information on Black Ops 4 is due out on May 17, when hopefully we'll find out if Treyarch will combine everything and make some sort of a last zombie standing mashup. But if you're thinking, that's alright, at least there's one AAA first-person shooter due out this year that won't include some kind of shrinking map survival mode, think again. Word on the street suggests that the next Battlefield will also feature Battle Royale, hopefully not at the expense of single player. On the other hand, if you are of the opinion that there simply aren't enough Battle Royale games on the market, here's a new one for you. Darwin Project is now free to play. All you need to do is download it and jump right in. Creative director Simon Darvo explains that the decision is actually part of making the game more accessible to fans by bringing in new players, upping the level of activity and reducing long queue times. We're aware that it's a big change, he says, but he wants to reiterate that the developers are remaining true to the Darwin Project vision as the game moves forward. Of course, if you have already paid money for the game, you will be rewarded with a Founders Pack containing legendary weapons, clothes and fan gifts, and they should be in your inventory already. And from one controversial gaming topic to another, the Dutch Gaming Authority has officially ruled that a number of popular games violate Dutch gambling rules thanks to the inclusion of loot boxes. The problem is that in at least 4 of the most popular games on the market, loot box contents can be sold for real-world money on third-party sites. Because they can be traded, they are granted an economic value, meaning that players can earn money for winning a rare item, and this is what violates the rules of chance. In the 6 other games under the spotlight, there is no real-world trading, which makes them okay for the Dutch. No specific games are being highlighted just yet, but the government has given the developers just 8 weeks to fix the problem. If the studios don't move fast, not only will their games be named and shamed, but the regulator can impose fines or even block sales of the games. But remember, it's not just the Netherlands that is highlighting this problem. Other European countries are conducting their own investigations into loot boxes and online gambling, including Scandinavia, Germany, and even Great Britain. Looks like the end of the loot box era might finally be in sight. And to finish off this week, a new exploit has been discovered on the Nintendo Switch that is making the homebrew scene very happy indeed. The exploit, known as Fusée Gelée, or Frozen Rocket, is a cold boot vulnerability that actually affects the entire line of NVIDIA Tegra embedded processors. Long story short, the team at Reswish has discovered a flaw in the hardware that enables a user to execute code on the chip's boot and power management processor before a read-only fuse kicks in. So, people who are that way inclined should be able to get all sorts of things running on Nintendo's hardware, complete with its portable touchscreen. As you may know, the homebrew history is peppered with bits and pieces like this, most of which are pretty quickly stomped out with firmware updates and patches from the manufacturer. Fusée Gelée, on the other hand, well, no solution is proposed. Believe it or not, the official stance is that consumers should be made aware of the situation so they can move to other devices where possible. Now, while it may take a little bit of hacking to discover a vulnerability like this, the team who discovered Fusée Gelée aren't sneaking around behind Nintendo's back. Before the exploit was revealed to the public, Nintendo, NVIDIA, and other affected vendors were all told about the issue, but there's really nothing anyone can do to fix it. In fact, the whole thing could have remained a secret had another hacking group, Team Executor, not also discovered the exploit. But while Kate Temkin and the team at Reswitched are using their powers for good, Team Executor were on the other side of the fence, planning to take the exploit and use it for profit, selling a mod to enable homebrew software. Announcing that they found Team Executor to be without morals or scruples, Kate and the team instead revealed Fusée Gelée in all its glory, hitting their rivals in the hip pocket and making it so that anyone can take advantage of homebrew software as long as they have a Nintendo Switch, a micro SD card, a USB A to C cable, and a screwdriver. For more information on any of these stories or to keep up to date with the latest gaming news, head to playerattack.com. But for now, stick around, we've got plenty more still to come.
Three months ago, Capcom released Monster Hunter World, the first original entry to the series for consoles in many years. If you've already played a Monster Hunter game, you'll be familiar here but notice a few upgrades. And if you've never played one before, this is the perfect opportunity to jump in. I just really want to make that clear. Monster Hunter World deviates from recent entries to the franchise by not feeling completely restrained on the Xbox One and PS4. For years now, Monster Hunter games have thrived on the 3DS and before that on Sony's PSP, but to me the games have always felt like they deserved a much bigger entry that allows the player to really take in the scope of what the games are trying to do. The controls were always limited too because neither system had a second analog stick for camera control, though the new 3DS does have that gimpy little nub that sort of takes care of that, I guess. On the Wii, we did get Monster Hunter Tri, which then got a re-release as Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate on Wii U. Both were fine, but the player base just wasn't there for many reasons, which affects the main purpose of the games, to team up and slay beasts. But hoo boy! Now, in 2018, we finally have a Monster Hunter game that controls well, has huge open environments, and multiplayer systems strong enough to take your hunts online with ease. So now I'm going to give you 5 reasons why you should be getting into Monster Hunter World if you haven't already. First up, the environments. In previous Monster Hunters, you would have to constantly wait for the game to load up new areas of a region you're hunting in. This was because of the limitations of the consoles not being able to run a large-scale map concurrently. Now though, the load times have been cut back drastically, and the environments you venture through feel so much larger and organic. The regions are so big that you'll want to take advantage of fast travelling between campsites to better track monsters. In fact, this affects the way that you hunt because you can very much see monsters and habitats way off in the distance, making you feel much more immersed in the experience. Next up, fireflies. Carrying on from the large environments, it's easy to get lost in Monster Hunter World, which is where the new firefly system comes in to make tracking such a snap. Throughout the various regions, you'll eventually come across all sorts of monster tracks, traces, and flora that have you feeling like you're constantly doing something. Even while you're chasing down Diablos, your fireflies can lead you to nearby herbs or bugs to quickly craft new medicines or gear to top you up for the next fight. Third are the online systems. The Monster Hunter games have always pushed the social experience, particularly when it comes to hunting the bigger monsters. In Monster Hunter World, it's now easy to drop in and out of people's games and vice versa. You can either party up with friends pre-hunt or open up a lobby while it loads to allow others to join you. Or if you're soloing but realise you're in over your head, which in these games isn't something to be embarrassed about really, you can head to the menu and opt to fire an SOS flare, which allows others to respond by joining and helping to finish the mission. I spent the first 20 hours just playing alone, but after sending out an SOS in a tough battle, I now frequently check to see who else is calling for assistance and join in just for fun. I honestly can't recall any other game with similar systems that I've taken advantage of this. Fourthly, hunts can get crazy. In previous games, you would usually be locked into hunting one type of large monster per mission despite the limited regions you can visit. In Monster Hunter World though, the game doesn't care what you're hunting. There are always other giant monsters out there prowling about. What that means is you might be duking it out with a Rathalos and be close to slaying it, only to be blindsided by an Anjanath who's decided to join in. This makes fights unpredictable because you may think you're an amazing hunter who can take advantage of traps and platforms, but then a surprise monster will just barge in, turning everything into a giant brawl and making you and any other fellow hunters in your posse have to rethink your entire strategy. And finally, the game is beautiful. I played this on a launch Xbox One, and while the frame rate isn't rock solid or the resolution isn't super crisp, Monster Hunter World still looks incredible. Cutscenes are immersive, environments are vibrant, and every monster looks and moves so brilliantly. Even the story, which is kind of silly when you read into the fact everyone's claiming they're researching this new world you've ventured into, but in fact you're all just killing everything you can just to make clothes, feels substantial in a way that hasn't before in the franchise. Okay, so there's so much more I could gush about with Monster Hunter World, but really it's just the kind of game you've got to get your hands on and try for yourself. I will warn that at first the controls and its systems might feel a bit confusing at first, but this game does do well to teach you as much as possible in the first few hours. Maybe even a little too much. But the charm, the quirkiness of the characters, and the thrill of taking down huge beasts either by yourself or with a team is just so fun and rewarding that you'll likely be coming back for many hours. At least, I know I definitely will.
Hello and welcome to 2 Hour Team, a show where we get a game, play it for 2 hours and then decide if we're going to refund it or keep it. I am Nate, playing as your mate Nate.
Hey, I'm Harmony, and I'm playing as Keep Calm and Kill More Zombies.
Hi, I'm Courtney, and I'm playing as Vixen the Uncharted today.
And I'm Warren, playing as Global.
And today we're looking at the turn-based strategy game, Pit People. Pit People is an out-there turn-based strategy game which is centered around combat in a comedic style where you go through a hilarious campaign either by yourself or with a friend. The style of Pit People is done in the same way of the predecessors of BattleBlock Theatre and Castle Crashers, with the same wacky comedy that accompanies both games. This turn-based adventure game reminds me very much of the TV series Adventure Time, as you go on a crazy wacky quest where you'll never predict what is coming, as anything could happen.
Straight off the bat, I found this game incredibly hilarious, including starting arguments with the narrator within a couple of minutes, and spent most of it giggling my way through at the presentation and overall verbal humour that the game presented itself with. All the characters spoke gibberish with the occasional word that you could distinguish thrown in, and quite often that word didn't actually match what their script was saying, so it was in general a lot more funny.
I said Horatio died! Oops! Butterfingers! How you say?
Combat is simple. You move all your characters to hexagon spaces and then they decide to attack what enemy they want to attack.
This whole free-thinking AI can be a bit frustrating at times, but it also makes you think about what your units tend to do and sort of position them in a way that best suits your style.
This adds a strategy layer to the game, where you need to think and choose carefully the spaces you move your characters to, as they might attack an enemy you didn't want to.
Obviously you've got your different battle units, so your ranged ones have to be placed at a distance so that their ranged weapons can affect their enemies, and your healers need to be placed near the wounded. Each turn that you take to move your characters around, you can obviously move a certain amount of places according to the distance and speed of your character.
You can also capture enemy units or recruit them, as the game puts it. You can add these units to your group of characters. This allows you to build different teams and adds further customization to the game. In terms of strategy, you need to use the customization mainly, as combat is just positioning your unit and letting them attack enemies. Combat also might have an objective that you need to fill, like destroying an object in a time limit or killing enemies in a certain order.
The co-op in this game is quite balanced and tries to be quite fair to both players at the same time, allowing each player to have control of their own full individual party and the loadouts of each character within that party, allowing them to build and control their units in the field any way they want. Even though you're playing cooperatively, it still feels like you have the same control as you would if you were playing single player.
So throughout the game, my partner Warren and I were trying to find a way to initiate the PvP, so as much as we found the area to phone, it was literally a phone booth, to phone Nate and Harmony into our game, we actually couldn't initiate it or get that started. We think and theorize that maybe after you've completed some of the main quests of the game, this area would be unlocked and the PvP could be initiated.
Pit People is a fantastic casual turn-based game, which is great to play either alone or alongside with a friend. It will have you in hysterics the whole way through, and I'm definitely keeping it.
I fell in love with Pit People the moment I watched the intro clip. The sounds, the art style, the animation, everything about this game is adorable. The story and commentary is hilarious. That, combined with the dark jokes and themes in the game, they have me hooked. The behemoth did not disappoint. I'm keeping it.
Overall, I found this casual game quite hilarious to play, and the random adventures that were awaiting my teammate Warren and I to be one of the most entertaining casual games I've played in a long time. I will be keeping this game, as I would love to play it with my friends again and see if we can eventually unlock the PvP.
Pit People is a casual game. It's funny and has simple mechanics. I would keep it as a casual strategy game, as it's fun and quite easy to play.
So that's 4 people keeping it and no one returning it, and that's available on Steam if you want to check out the hilarious turn-based strategy game, Pit People. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
It's been 5 years since the last game in the series, but now Kratos is back in a new God of War. Well recognised for its depiction of hypermasculinity and the generic bald guy protagonist, God of War is a complete turnaround for the series and finally does justice to a character whose pain drives him to kill monsters, behemoths, and gods. The premise of God of War takes Kratos away from the Greek mythology he's usually associated with and moves him into Norse mythology. He's also a father again, taking his son Atreus with him on his journey after the death of the boy's mother. The original series drove Kratos mad with rage after the death of his family, but in this outing, young Atreus' inexperience and childish demeanour is a motivation to keep Kratos grounded and much more relatable as a character trying to control his emotions. And it's this dynamic that kept drawing me in towards the story. I mean, don't get me wrong, killing enormous enemies and exploring incredible environments is of course a great experience, but the father-son relationship here, woven into ancient legends, is what really hooked me. On the surface, God of War is a beautiful game and a real showpiece of what the PS4 is capable of on its way towards its 5th birthday. I played this on a launch PS4 and the visuals are jaw-droppingly smack yo mama good. I can only imagine how the game looks on a PS4 Pro in 4K, but that said, the game does have its hiccups, and roughly 4 patches since I started playing a few days before launch, there are some blemishes. Text can be a bit difficult to read, but in a recent patch that was rectified somewhat. However, the latest patch now causes some framing issues when transitioning between gameplay and cutscenes. Actually, speaking of the cutscenes, God of War incorporates a no-cuts film technique in which the camera never cuts away from its subject, unless Kratos dies, of course. While I'm not particularly excited by this, as there have been games in the past that more or less have already done this, like the Dead Space series, it does add to the grandiose presentation of the game that makes transitions between player agency and the theatrics so much more raw. From a gameplay perspective, Kratos' son Atreus does offer so much to Kratos. While Kratos will mostly focus on close quarters combat, Atreus offers backup while taking on periphery enemies and can be controlled to stun enemies from a distance. This makes for some satisfying combos and opens up the combat from being a series of repetitive button mashing. In fact, the combat attributes that focused risk-reward style made popular by the Dark Souls games, rather than taking on 10 enemies at once like was the case in the original God of War games. It challenges the player to understand what Kratos is capable of rather than zoning out and going through the motions, and this is all complemented by the game's skill tree and gear management. However, Atreus isn't only used to slay beasts. As I said earlier, he's the means of grounding Kratos, making him necessary in their new adventure in a completely different world. For example, as Kratos is Greek, he can't read Nordic runes, and this plays into the dynamic of the father possessing wisdom but being entirely reliant on the knowledge of his son to progress. And Atreus as a character does challenge his father, which results in Kratos having to open himself up in a way we haven't gotten to see before. It's a third dimension in what was widely considered a 2D character. In terms of combat, the most important piece of Kratos' new arsenal is his Leviathan axe, which completely changes how the series approaches combat and puzzles. It can be used to attack from a distance and charge for devastating attacks, but importantly it's also used in puzzles to freeze or disable mechanisms. While the axe is thrown, Kratos can engage with his shield and fists, which further alters the dynamic. And the way Kratos summons back the axe, exactly how Thor summons his hammer Mjolnir, feels powerful every time. Thankfully, the combat doesn't at all feel stale like previous games used to towards the end when everything was beefed up. And in a game that's around 30 hours long, that's pretty important. As mentioned earlier, God of War's sense of scale isn't compromised and in fact feels larger than its predecessors, including that insane opening to 2010's God of War 3 on the PS3. Here in 2018's version, while the action may not be balls out insane, the world and mythology itself measures the scale of the experience. Also, God of War isn't explicitly an open world game, but rather takes on elements of the genre and allows you to explore and backtrack most environments. Think more Metroidvania than full-blown RPG. I found myself easily falling into the experience Santa Monica Studios has created in God of War. While many facets of popular culture attribute aspects of Norse mythology, from Tolkien to Marvel, I never really felt particularly familiar with its legends and lessons. In God of War though, it delves deeply into those stories and provides so much context into the backgrounds of many iconic figures and presents a tale in which a new character, a Greek god, might fit into it. While the God of War series has been previously known for its gratuitous violence to the point of being immature, this year's God of War is the grown-up phase of its existence, providing real emotional gravitas on a story about a father and his son. Legends are stories we tell over generations, and I feel like we'll be talking about this God of War for a long while to come.
My turn.
And that's about it for this edition of Player Attack. Thanks for watching. Next week, we look forward to the release of Detroit Become Human with a very special chat with creator David Cage. In the meantime, you can catch us at playerattack.com. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you've got something you want to say, send us an email, mailbox@playerattack.com, or just hop on our forums. Also, if you want to support Player Attack, you can find us on Patreon and help us bring you the latest in gaming news, plus all these wonderful interviews and reviews from the world of video games. Till next week, I'm Jessica Citizen, and this is Player Attack.